Morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started.
What kind of setting?
Oops. Can you pull this over? Because I can't read it with her. I was planning on reading it. Okay. All right. I hope everyone is excited about today. We're very happy to have you guys here. We're very happy to have our panelists here. Thank you for coming. My name is Tracy Lasewski, and I am an administrator for supporters of HISD Magnets and Budget Accountability. Created in 2018, Supporters is an active Facebook group with over, well, now it's almost 8,500 members. Engaged members dedicated to advocating for positive change within HISD through research and data-driven initiatives. Principal turnover, I skipped the line, sorry. The 2023-2024 school year brought big changes to HISD classrooms and leadership. Principal turnover skyrocketed to an all-time high, and dismissal of some of our strongest leaders led to protests and walkouts, further record-setting turnover within our teaching ranks. Today, we have a unique opportunity to hear from some of these former HISD principals. Our panel will share their personal experiences in HISD and reflect on the changes they've witnessed in the district. We will let them share their thoughts, both the positives and the areas for improvement, then open the floor for some audience questions, and we're going to leave some time at the end for networking and conversation.
Hi, my name is Amy Maddox. I'm also an administrator of the Supporters Facebook group. This is a good segue. We are recording this, and bear with us because we are not experts at this kind of thing. And we actually have, bear with all of us because we have a couple of different microphones, one so you guys can hear us and one for the recording. Once the recording is available, we'll send a link to everyone who registered, and we'll post it in the supporters group, and you are free and encouraged to share it. Our panelists collectively have over 100 years of experience in HISD. Their full bios are in your program. As an aside, I want to say I only knew one of these people before this year, and I feel like regardless of anything, we in HISD are very lucky to have had some really great leaders, and we still have some really great leaders in our ranks that really are dedicated to HISD students. I'm going to introduce our panelists briefly in alphabetical order. They are not seated in alphabetical order, so if y'all could just give a little wave when I mention your name. Dr. Jessica Berry, former principal of Herod Elementary. Dr. Berry spent a decade in HISD, serving as an administrator at both Harvard Elementary School and at Herod. She has a master's degree in educational leadership and is completing her doctorate in ethical leadership. Gretchen Casper Hoffman is the former principal of Tanglewood, formerly Grady Middle School, and was with HISD for over 28 years, all in middle school. She taught at, yes, I mean, we've all had middle schools, right? She taught at Gregory Lincoln and Fondren. She helped open Penn Oak Middle School and served as principal at Tanglewood for 18 years. Sean McClish has served HISD for 11 years. He was assistant principal at Frank Black Middle School for 8 years. That's where I personally had the privilege of my kids benefiting from his leadership. And he has served the past 5 years as an elementary principal at the school at St. George Place. Dr. Leah Michelin is the former principal at Westbriar Middle School and has 20 years experience in education. Among other things, she is a former HISD Assistant Principal of the Year. She served on Superintendent Miles' Principal Advisory Committee, and she was part of HISD's Senior Leadership Academy. She also has a doctorate in ethical leadership. Auden Sarabia is the former principal at Meyerland Performing and Visual Arts. He is a 30-year educator with an incredible 29 of those years spent in HISD. He's been at McGregor Elementary School, Wharton Dual Language Academy, Roberts Elementary School, Crespo Elementary School, and the last 7 years at MPVA. He is also a former HISD Principal of the Year. Amanda Wingard started her career as a third grade teacher at Neff Elementary School taking over for her own third grade teacher when she attended NEF. And she has spent the last 21 years at NEF as a teacher, instructional coordinator, assistant principal, and for the last decade as NEF's principal, where she was recognized as an HISD Principal of the Year. And last but not least, Samantha Woods is the former principal of Valley West Elementary School. She has worked the last 9 years in HISD, but has 20 years of service in public education in both ALEAF ISD and HISD. She has a master's degree in education administration. And now we will turn things over to our panel, and after they speak, we will have some time for audience questions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone who sent in questions with your registration. It helped us quite a bit in coming up with these roundtable questions. I want to move forward so I can actually see the panel here. Hi, panel. All right. To start off, can you speak a few minutes about the state of the district before Superintendent Miles arrived, and what your expectations were at the beginning of the 2023-2024 school year? Amanda, we'll start with you. We had to move it. Yes, got it.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Get that one pretty close.
Okay, are we good? Okay, yeah, no problem. State of the district. Well, I was also on the principal advisory committee actually the year that the takeover started to happen, and then this past year as we got into it. So I had a good perspective when Commissioner Morath came and spoke with us in a small group setting and then a large group setting in March. I think we were all concerned, but also a little bit optimistic, honestly, and just maybe some of the things that we had concerns on where we were in HISD could happen and maybe move forward without so much, I guess, not infighting, but disagreement, and that we just felt like a lot of time, or I don't want to say we, I felt like a lot of time things weren't happening because there wasn't support by the board of the superintendent and vice versa. And so when Superintendent Miles came and spoke to us that in June of 2024 to kind of set his vision and expectations, I was cautiously optimistic because there were some changes and some things that I think needed to happen and that possibly would be able to happen, and wanted to give this change in leadership and dynamic a chance.
Good morning. The state of the district, from my perspective, before Superintendent Miles took over, of course, we knew that there were some changes that needed to be made in HISD. However, we had begun to see some change. We were at a B rating at that time. It was clear which schools needed to be targeted, and I felt that there was a plan in place to start moving that. And upon the arrival of Superintendent Miles, like Amanda shared, I was optimistic. Of course, we had heard all of the media light on Superintendent Miles, but for me, I was willing to give it a chance because people can change, situations can change. And so I was very optimistic. I did go to the June meeting where we met with Superintendent Miles. He rolled out his vision. There were a lot of things that were not clear, but when you're trying to improve, you want to be open to change. And so that is the direction that I went in. Not only did I take that perspective, I shared that perspective with my staff as well, that we were going to be open-minded. We chose a theme, let the adventure begin. And so we were willing to be open to Superintendent Miles as well as his vision.
I feel like my thoughts are very similar, that I was optimistic that we would be going in a good direction. I think Mr. Miles has a way with his words of saying key words that sound like, hey, this is the direction we want to go, and we all want high quality instruction for all students. We want all students to grow. I felt like prior to Mr. Miles coming in, the district wasn't in a perfect state, but we were definitely moving in a positive direction. I could see consistency happening across the district, and in that June meeting, it sounded like a lot. It sounded like he wanted a lot, and he wanted a lot very quickly. But what he was saying wasn't horrible. It was mostly positive for kids, and a lot of, I'm going to take things off of administrators' plates so you can be in the classroom, so you can be impacting students. Those were not things that I saw take place at my campus, but.
And we agree.
But I think Amanda said it perfectly, cautiously optimistic that things could be going in a positive direction if the actions matched the words that we were being told in June.
Good morning. Good morning. So agreed that anytime you have a change in leadership, you should expect some sort of change. As you heard, I've been a principal for 18 years. I've seen a lot of change in the district. I've only been here in HISD. And wanting some consistency. All of us had been finishing up with COVID, which we thought was very difficult. Y'all got to see at home what that looked like. And you know, with so many changes, and that we were looking forward to something positive happening, something for our kids, because we're all up here on this panel because we love kids and we love what we do, and we all want the best for every single kid, not just the kid on our campus, but all of HISD, you know, and you hear that we're not together on that and people are different, but it's not the case. And again, positive, seeing some consistency, which we desperately needed in the district. As Dr. Berry said, more time in the classroom sounded like a dream. You know, that you weren't going to be tasked with all these activities and things, and that was not the case.
I will concur with what I've heard so far. I also was very optimistic. When I spoke to my staff about what was coming, I reminded them that the only thing that is constant in life is change. And so HISD has always been a solid district. We had a lot of great things happening for us. We had a lot of strong programs. Were we perfect? No, but no district ever really is. There's always room for improvement. So we were excited. I was excited hearing that a lot of the compliance paperwork, a lot of the things that took us out of the classrooms were going to be taken off our plates and given to the new executive directors for support, the executive directors, the different departments. So that really lifted me up, thinking I would love to spend more time inside of the classrooms and not have to worry about paperwork. And so I was open to the possibilities, and I was looking forward to what Mike Miles was promising.
I was kind of in the same boat, you know, just at the, prior to Mike Miles taking the reins as superintendent in 23, 24, we had several years of maybe superintendents who had not been staying so long. I know there's Mr. Carranza, who was with us for a year and a half, and it was, yeah, kind of turbulent. And then I know that Dr. Lathan had been with us, you know, kind of this, you know, interim superintendent that had, you know, kind of year after year was never permitted to, you know, take the reins full time and moved on. I was enjoyed our time with Mr. House, who came for about 2 years. I really found him very personable. There was a big coaching. A lot of our PD was around coaching. I really felt good about the interactions that I would have with our central office. You felt valued, and that for the most part, at least the ones that I was dealing with, were supportive. I do remember when Mr. Morath came in March, I think, to talk to us about the changes that may be coming. Again, one of the things about HISD is there's so many amazing schools. There's award-winning schools, some of the best in the country. And then there's some schools that we're struggling, you know, and seeing that, okay, you want to be optimistic about it, you know, and the way that it was laid out, that we can, you know, kind of focus on these certain schools in these certain areas and close those gaps. It sounded great, Again, you want to always assume the best, and we were looking forward to that. I think that, and not that it was, one thing that maybe got me paused, and I don't know if anybody else felt this way on the panel, I think when Mr. Miles sent the initial email, maybe to the staff, kind of introducing, himself and who he is, you kind of read it, things kind of came across maybe in absolutes that, hey, maybe the district kind of seemed to be on fire, and that's why these things were maybe necessary. I thought maybe certain areas there were some gaps, but I felt that there's a lot of really, really great things that were going on. As you can see, there's a lot of principals, amazing principals on this panel here, and so many that are still in the district who've been with HISD a long time, who are doing a phenomenal job, schools that are doing a phenomenal job serving kids. So I also didn't understand, I know that when NES started, which I think is, a great, certain things have to change. If you've got a school that's been failing for years and years and years, change, I think, is necessary, but I did see that there were maybe there's an A school and there were several B schools, and there were certain schools that were being added into NES just because they were, I guess, part of a feeder pattern of a high school that may have been failing, and I didn't understand necessarily why that might be. I didn't ever get a chance, or didn't feel like it was my place to ask or question that at that time, but that kind of gave me pause that, okay, how are decisions going to be made? And are they always going to be something that's really well thought out, or something that's taking a real comprehensive view of things? But yeah, you come in comprehensive, as the panel said. Mr. Miles laid out a vision and a plan, and we were behind it 100%. We really wanted to, again, see that necessity to close those gaps, help the entire district have some consistency that may have been missing between different schools in different areas. So yeah, closing that up and becoming a little tighter, we were all behind it, I think.
Hello, yeah, so, can you hear me? Is that good? Before the takeover, I think the only thing, I was out in the West, and, we were kind of on our own island out there, and everything was hunky-dory, and we were good to go. So the only issues that we really had prior to the takeover were really at central office and the paperwork and things, the bureaucracy and yada yada. So when he spoke of that, when he came in June, it was like, well, heck yeah. The other thing that he spoke of was autonomy, and this concept of autonomy, and I thought, well, that's even better. I mean, we're doing well, so we get to do whatever we want, or we get to have more control and autonomy, and I took that to heart, and I took that back to my campus, and that turned out not to be the case, but we were on board with a lot of those things. We were on board with the change. Another thing is when he made us feel like we had a voice, and so people would speak up in that June meeting. He'd talk about appraisal, and too much paperwork with appraisal be gone. It's gonna be one checklist, and you don't have to do this many paperworks, but you gotta be in the classroom. So he made us feel like we had some power and some, decision making, a seat at the table. And so I think that was another reason why we were like, well, yeah, all right, this could be good. So a lot of smoke and mirrors, but I think we were all on board. We are all accustomed to change. We are all accustomed to being the face of change for our campus and coming back to campus and going, all right, guys, it's going to be great, no matter how we feel, and getting them on board. And so that's what we did, and I think we were excited for a lot of that, and just starting off the year with that positive tone.
Can I throw something in real quick as I'm listening to all my colleagues here? And I'm speaking for myself and they can nod. I still felt that I needed to support the district in May. After everything, I wasn't planning on going anywhere. I was planning on staying and supporting my staff and supporting my kids. And never once did I go against what was being said or what was being done. I did my best to support the changes and support those changes with my staff and my students. And so I just wanted to make that clear that I'm not sitting here as someone that was like fighting it tooth and nail going throughout the whole year. In May, my plan was still to return to my campus, to be supportive and to follow and try to grow the district.
Thank you. Our next question is it's about the evaluation system. Mr. Miles brought Mr. Miles brought with him a new evaluation system for principals, which he calls LEAD. If you can you tell the audience about your experience with evaluations this year, and if you are comfortable sharing sort of what happened in your personal situation, only if you're comfortable. We would love to hear more about the evaluation process, the termination process, and sort of how you got here on this table today. Sorry.
And I think, I've told and been a little bit more vocal about my story, so I'm going to set the table a little bit, if that's okay. Everybody on this panel is actually in what is called the West Division, and there's a reason for that, so I want to give a little setup of that. We all had no notice that we were going to be asked to resign. We were completely caught off guard. I luckily was not on my campus, and I did it a little bit more on my own terms, but knew it was coming. Our direct supervisors, which are the executive directors, had no idea that we were going to be asked to resign. My own executive director called me that night to make sure that I did something that was due the next day, and I had to inform him about my being asked to resign. All that to say, I think where we all really struggled through this whole process is not being given the respect that we deserved with the experience that we had and the success that we had had at all of our campuses. And that was mainly due to Dr. Laura Stout and Norma Castillo. I'm going to name names because that's the facts. And because of that, we have all had, again, I'll speak for myself, but imposter syndrome and what we have, again, accomplished and done for kids and for students over our many, many years of experience. And this didn't just happen in the West Division. I want to make sure that's clear too. Many of our colleagues in other divisions were also asked to resign in a more respectful way. And basically they knew it was coming, so they could make the decision on how it kind of happened. They could step away quietly, which is absolutely what I would have done for my community if it was done at least in that way. And at least if I had some idea, speaking to what Gretchen had said, if I at least had some idea that I was on thin ice and that I was doing something wrong. Because at the end of the day, and again, I think we'll get a lot of head nods. It's hard not to say we, but when all of this happened, you would have thought I was Mike Miles' ¡1 supporter, because I went back to my campus and I said, we've got to do this. This is some good. We need to change. And the culture shifted on my campus quite a bit in in the fall, as I had to have individual conversations, because a lot of my staff were not happy with me because of everything happened. And so I had to do a lot of coaching and a lot of conversations to support and make sure that we were going to move as a campus and that we were going to try to do and make some change at NEF and in HISD just in general. And so for all of this to happen was just, I don't know, it's been a very difficult few months. And again, it did not have to happen and be this way if we were treated with some dignity, quite honest. Like I'm a principal. We all have coached teachers out that weren't good for kids. We've all had really hard conversations with teachers and staff members on things that they weren't doing well or they needed to improve on. We have that experience. I've never treated my worst employee like I was treated in May, and that's unacceptable.
Thank you, Amanda. Just to add to some of the things that Amanda shared, my experience was similar. No, I was not told in any way throughout the whole school year that, there was any problems at my campus. We had gone through the lead system, all the coaching, developing, anything that we were asked to do. And I think that was the one thing that hurt my staff the most, because they shared, Miss Woods, Principal Woods, you did everything they asked you to do and above. And so, yes, it did catch us off guard. Me personally, I had just returned from a funeral leave that I had asked my family to prolong so that I could be there for my students when they took their STAR test on April 30th. A family member that passed on April 21st that I asked to hold the funeral until the first weekend in May so that I could be there for my staff and students. I come back, well, before I come back, I'm there Thursday preparing for the service, and I get a call with the West area knowing that I was out for funeral leave. I get a call about business. I interviewed in the airport, hiring people. This is what I did. And so, yes, I was caught off guard. As I said, it had not been expressed to me that this was a problem. In some of the meetings that Superintendent Miles had, he made it clear that the bottom 10% of campuses would be those individuals that may be in jeopardy, the bottom 10%. I was not part of the bottom 10%. My accountability rating for 22 was a B+. I was 3 points away from being an A, and we were graded in all domains. I did not get a waiver in anything. We were working up to what we needed to do. Even in my middle of the year screener, I had four teachers that were at unacceptable rating. 4 teachers, that was 14% of my teachers. Our staff was doing what they needed to do. So to hear this, and as Amanda shared, even our ED, when I called him that day, I said, "What is this?" He had no idea.
We had the same one.
We had the same idea, ED, and he shared, I didn't know. I didn't know. So what kind of transparency is that? Dr. Stout had come to my school before I left for the funeral. She never said anything was wrong. There was no coaching and developing. I don't have a problem for being terminated if I'm not doing my job. I have no problem with it. I am very big on accountability. But that was not the case. My data at that time did not suggest what was shared with me in a meeting that was held with me, that my performance level was down. Regarding, you asked about the IRT, at that time, I was at Proficient 1. My last IRT visit was a 12.5 out of 15. I mean, and what I want you to understand, these are all educators. We hold 2, 3, some 4 degrees. And I'm not putting so much in that, but we didn't buy them. We didn't buy them.
And we're certified.
And we're certified.
All of us.
And have held the positions in order.
Yes.
And one thing that my former supervisors would be able to tell you, if it's someone that knew data, this girl knew data. I knew how to break data down. I knew where we were. I even knew what my score was, my what-if score was for the accountability rating that was not released. Why? Because I had already been in a meeting with HISD accountability, with the assessment team. I was 1 point under where I was the year before. I was at 86 overall. So all of this was really blindsiding. You know, all of this data that just came about that made no sense, and how we derived upon the reason for asking you to resign because of your IRT score, because of your NWEA scores. If I only had 4 teachers that were unacceptable, you know, that says a lot. I mean, those teachers were successful, that means their students were successful. But all of this, just in a cloud of smoke, all of a sudden, and that's where we were. I did not go to the extent my parents came. They wanted to, march. But we didn't do it, and then after everything, calmed down, I said, no, leave it alone. Leave it alone. Mainly because I needed to focus on what I still needed to do. We still had one IRT. I could have opted out, but my staff said, no, Principal Woods, we're going to do it because we've been doing our job. We did the fourth one. We had 11.34. I mean, make it make sense. It just does not make sense. So we went on. My staff did really well with NWEA. I have the data. Yes, before I left, I snipped everything. I have it. But that's the type of person I am, and my staff knew that. I document well. So we did everything we were asked to do. The district did not do what they promised to do.
Yep.
There was no data shared. Now, if it's 10% of your lowest, campuses, that's equivalent to 27 schools. There were more than 27 principals asked to resign or terminated. It didn't make sense. Even using the data that Superintendent Miles gave out in January with all of the schools listed with the score that he gave them, I had 104 schools that were lower than me, 104. So, no, it didn't make sense. But if you ask questions, then that was a problem.
What I noticed when both Amanda and Samantha were talking is there wasn't a lot of comments about specifically LEAD, and I think it's because, at least personally, I don't know much about what LEAD is. When you change it 9 times in a school year, that would be like telling a student, if you get a 95, you have an A, and then 2 weeks later, wait, that's a B, and now it's a C, oh wait, it's back to an A, and that's what LEAD was. There was not any consistency of this is how you're being rated. We all know things have to be edited. We have all been serving in education. Things change daily. What our students need, what our parents need, they change all the time, but what you're being rated on being a moving target that is not shared with you when it is moving, because I don't think I have a single email that says, hey, the LEAD guidebook was updated, maybe you want to check out what you're being rated on now. Like both ladies over here, I had no idea that I was going to be asked to resign. It wasn't even a thought process. My campus, my staff was very, very frustrated. Frustrated because we changed curriculums, frustrated because we weren't getting the materials that we needed to appropriately do the curriculum, and we had staff that was leaving. They lived far from our campus, and they had been driving 45 minutes to an hour in because they wanted to be at my school. They wanted to work with these students. Some of the teachers that left had gone to Herod. Like, one of my teachers was in the first dual language class at Herod, had gone all the way through the program, and then came back to teach. And so that's the kind of community it was, and we had teachers leaving. Going into May, I knew we had a good amount of teachers leaving. We had about 43 staff members, and I knew we had 14 leaving. And some of them it was because life changes were moving. Some of them was because I can't do this with the district anymore, I'm not sure. And I spent a lot of time talking to the other teachers. Okay, this is what we're gonna do next year. This is how we're gonna do this. This is how I'm gonna support you. These are the community meetings we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna get PTO involved. And I got so many teachers to agree to stay. They were like, if you tell me you are not leaving, I will not go. And so I was like, I am not gonna go. So Norma Castile, because I will say her name and Dr. Stout's name every time, comes into my campus, and at that point I only had one AP who happened to be out had COVID. and comes in. I get a text message while I'm in a parent meeting at the front office asking me to leave a special education ARD meeting to come talk with Norma. And I said, I cannot do that. And they said, okay, we'll be back. About an hour and a half later, I was now in a different ARD meeting because it was the day that we held these meetings, and that we were not going to reschedule them because my AP was out, because our parents make plans to be on campus these days. So hour and a half later, I get a text message that they were back on campus. And honestly, at this point, I still had not been like, oh, they're gonna ask me to resign at that point. And then later in that day, I was late to an ARD meeting because I was the only person on campus to handle discipline, and some of our fifth graders, it was May. And so I was running late to the last ARD meeting I had to do for the day. And Norma Castile and Kenneth Turner walk into my building, and they said, oh, we've been looking for you, we need to talk. And I said, I'm late to an ARD. And they said, don't worry, this is only gonna take 5 minutes.
Literally.
Yeah, that's what they said. We walk back to my office, they hand me a request for my resignation and tell me, hey, you're gonna need to sign this. And I said, are you telling me you want me to sign this right now? And they said, you have a few days, I guess. You need to let us know by Tuesday because of the board meeting. And I was like, okay. And then they were like, you can go to your meeting now. So I got up and I walked, like, I was walking from my office. I had several staff members be like, what's going on? Because they all knew, they were like, the suits are here, what's going on? And I handed my social worker and my SIRS person my request for resignation. I said, they just asked me to leave. And then I went to the SARD meeting and I finished my day. I told them 2 days later that I would not be resigning. My resignation, and I've seen a few other resignations from people, both people from the West and people from other divisions, and mine was very different than other people's, and mine said that I could never work in HISD again. And mine, this was all, I had never been written up, ever, like ever from a teacher, and a week before this I had been written up for expressing my concerns, which is what my memo says, which is something that, it was expressing my concerns about special education. And
So you're written up for expressing a concern?
yes, and it says that, and I mean, I've sat in a lot of meetings with legal from HISD, and they always said, if you're gonna write someone up, be okay with this being read in front of a courtroom. And that memo said, expressing your concerns, and I heard that you were concerned about spending money on something. And I was like, yes, I was concerned about these things. But I was written up by my direct supervisor, who was not present for any of these things, and then at one point agreed with me in a meeting that other people were in. It was a crazy thing. And then I had submitted to him, hey, this is a violation of not only HISD policy, but state and federal law, so I won't do it. And then less than a week later, I was asked to resign. And so that was my experience. I gave them a few days. I said no, that I wouldn't resign. I didn't hear anything back. I sent a more formal letter a week later, I wouldn't resign. Didn't hear anything back. Waited a few weeks, and then I did speak to media. I did. I said, okay, you guys want to know what's going on? I can't get HISD to reply to anything. The first communication I sent to HISD was May 10th. The first time HISD replied to me was July 19th. And they replied to me finally, and that's replied to me and my representative, because I still never resigned. And they finally replied because I ended up moving. I got a job in a different city, and I'm trying to rent an apartment, and HISD won't give me my pay stubs, and an apartment needs pay stubs for proof of income. And so they finally did. It took them 3 weeks, but they finally did give me my pay stubs. But they're just making things so incredibly difficult and not treating people with any level of dignity. And that's really what it was. And I tried to get my staff to stay after they knew I was leaving, and I didn't, Amanda and I both didn't get to finish the school year, and I would guess specifically because we talked to media. Yeah. That would be my guess as why. But my staff, after I left, we went from 14 teachers leaving to 32. And last time I talked to anyone, the campus still isn't fully staffed, and that is horrible. And that's very sad to me. Because if you wanted me gone, that's fine. I mean, you could have done it appropriately. You could have treated me with dignity. It could have been a conversation or things I knew that were happening. But now you have over 700 kids starting school on Monday, and is the campus fully staffed? Did you put that effort in? Did you put special attention to all these campuses that you asked their leadership to leave to make sure that this already very short summer of planning, that these campuses are ready to start? Because it takes all summer to plan for the next school year, and making that 2-week earlier start really changes what you need to do in the summer. And my question is, did they make them ready? Do these new leaders on these campuses, are they prepared? Do they know what lead is? Do they know what they're being evaluated with? Because I still can't answer how I was evaluated. I never had a single observation. I never had a single conversation. I never had a single coaching conversation. Dr. Stout was on my campus 3 different times, and none of them were for coaching. All of them were because there was a tragedy on my campus, and she wanted to know if the student that experienced this tragedy needed a home because she was interested in fostering this child. That was the only communication that we ever had with her coming onto my campus.
Again, as stated, we still don't know what the results are from LEAD. And in speaking to colleagues that have remained in HISD, they also still do not have the results of LEAD. And again, a moving target, never an email on a change of how you're being evaluated. And, you know, we were in that room right before spring break saying, well, you haven't done really well, and so it just might be good for you at the end of the year. And then Mr. Miles coming back and saying, oh, no, they're okay. We're going to wait until the end of the year, and we're going to get through all the data before we, decide on where your stand is. And so, we appreciate the parents who went and spoke to Mr. Miles and said, hey, you can't be removing these principals. We need to know why. But it still happened anyway. Again, we appreciate you going to the board meetings and saying things, but it still happens anyway. And then the reply from the district is, and this is the part that really, really upsets me, oh, we're going to find better people to lead these campuses because they didn't meet our needs. I am an 18-year veteran of that campus. I guarantee you, under the leadership I had been before, I probably would have been removed under some other superintendents because I do voice what I need. I didn't feel like we could voice our opinions last year at all or be supported. But to not know, and granted, was my data the best? No. I know that. My map data was not great. We have struggled with STAR. I have seen as being on the campus, I have seen my demographic change in the past 2 years drastically, the demographic. And as an educator, you have to take the time to figure out what your demographic needs. Those kids need you to figure that out. And I was not given the opportunity to figure out what my kids needed. Again, Dr. Laura Stout was on my campus for 20 minutes. 20 minutes all year long. And I have never been so disrespected in my life. And the fact, and this is, I had kids doing novel studies. She said, is that in the curriculum? No, ma'am, I'm an international baccalaureate. We are expected to have our kids critically think. Therefore, we have novel studies. Well, I just don't think that's okay. Did not like anything I was doing on campus, but at the end, asked me for a hug because it was gonna be okay. It was not okay. And also reassured all these people at this table too, reassured after that spring break meeting that she wanted to keep all of us because we were the best principals in the West. And here we are.
So I think the question was, what happened? And I looked over at Gretchen and said, I don't know. I don't know. Very similar, but I received a visit from Dr. Norma Castillo and Ken Turner. I too was in the classroom and I was called up to the front and said, you have visitors. And I came in and they sat down and said, we need you to read this. And I too was blindsided. I could not believe what I was seeing. I was shocked. And it took me a second, then I asked a lot of questions, but one of them was, why are you the one that is here telling me this? I have an executive director, my direct supervisor, who spent much more time in my classroom with me, doing calibrated walks, going into the classrooms, coaching. She saw what I was doing. And so I asked, why are you the one bringing this to me? As a principal, and we all know this, we have those difficult conversations with our staff. If there's a concern, then the teacher already knows it well in advance of any kind of a meeting that we're going to have about their employment. There's a documentation trail, there's memos, there's emails, and again, there's a lot of coaching conversations, none of which had happened with me. Not once had anyone come and spoken to me and said, we have a concern with your leadership. We have a concern with how you're running the school. We have a concern with you. Never, not once. And so it took me by surprise. And then I asked her, what is this based on? And so she opened up a folder and said, well, anticipating I might get asked that, I asked the same question, and these are the talking points. So she really did not know, but they gave her talking points. And so she named off 3. She said our STAR scores had fallen from the year before. I said that was the whole district in the state. We were not the only ones. And I had data to show that we were still outperforming the state and HISD in most categories. She said they also said that your MAP scores were not where they needed to be middle of the year. I said I would agree with that. We are actually working on that and I've made adjustments to it, but we're not supposed to be evaluated on MAP at this time. And then she said there was a memo in your file. That really got my goat. There was a memo in my file from March. My executive director came in on March, sat down with me, and handed me a memo and said we were not meeting our campus goals for observations. The district created a tracker, a dashboard that literally tracked how many times we walked into classrooms to do an observation. We were required to do 6 a week, 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon. The campus goal was determined on the number of administrators that you had doing these observations. So on my campus, we had the principal, and then I had 3 deans of instruction. So there were 4 of us that counted towards these observations and the campus goal. In October, when they were creating the dashboard, our senior executive director, Joseph Villarreal, came to my campus and told me, we are going to move one of your deans to Wisdom High School. I asked why. That also was a surprise. Well, we're putting a new team together to help Wisdom. They're getting a new principal, and we're going to put a strong team around him. I've seen your new dean. She's really strong. We want her at Wisdom. How do you think she's going to feel about that? I said, I don't know. I guess she would have to consider it. But it's going to be a surprise. And he said, we're not asking. So he asked me to go bring her in and then asked me, do you want to tell her or should I? I said, no, absolutely, you tell her. This is your decision. I'm not happy with it either. So I had to go and pull her, bring her in so that she could receive the news that it was on a Friday, the following Monday, she would be reporting to Wisdom. So when that happened and they took away that administrator from me, now there was not 4 of us, there was 3 of us left. And so the campus dashboard needed to have been adjusted to reflect that. They never did it. They never did it. So our numbers were off. From that point on, they were off. When I figured this out, because when I asked my ED, and I told her those numbers are off. There's something wrong. Maybe your dashboard is glitching again, because it had happened several times. She said, I don't know why, but that is your problem to solve. And so I contacted the IT department. I contacted teacher evaluation. I was trying to make sense of it. And when I started playing with the numbers, that's when I realized what had happened. When they took one of my administrators away, they never adjusted for that on the dashboard. And so it looked like we were not doing our observations on a weekly basis, even though they could go in there and look at each individual appraiser and see we were all doing them. We were literally doing hundreds a month. And so that was the memo that I received, and I pointed that out to Norma. She's like, well, I can't really speak to that. I would like more detail, I said. And she said, well, in order to get more detail and to have a real conversation about the why, then you would have to go forward for a conference for the record. If you do that, at that point, your name will appear on the board agenda as someone who's being recommended for non-renewal. Kenneth Turner said yes, and that's why we're here today. If you sign this now, your name won't be put on the board agenda. Nobody will see it. I laughed and I said, at this point, my name's been in the Houston Chronicle. I said, more people are reading that than the board agenda. That's not my concern. I want to know why. They couldn't answer, she couldn't answer the why. And so, yeah, I still don't know. My executive director, I don't know if she was ever aware. She ghosted me after that. The handful of times that we met, she would bring someone from West Division office, and it was usually to talk about either master schedule or end of the Y map testing or STAR testing. There were other things that we needed to talk about, but she never once tried to broach the subject about why this was happening to me. And that really surprised me, because I really felt that I had gained her respect. I had respected her, and again, I just thought, where's the common decency in having a conversation with me and asking me, are you okay? Because they knew I was not expecting this. I was not expecting this at all. Their visits were never about coaching. It was never about instruction, not really instruction. When they would come in, the executive director and senior executive director, it was more about compliance. Are the teachers using timers? Are they using the MRS strategy? Are they writing? They were not paying attention to the quality of question being asked or the quality of response. They were just looking for the logistical parts of the spot form. Are those things being done? That was their concern. And so, like I'm sure the other principals here, we were trying to make that spot form work for us. And we were trying to make it work for the teachers. We had a lot of conversations with our teachers about how we could make it work, how some of these things were simply best practice that you already do. Maybe not every 4 minutes, but these are things that you do. And so I really felt like it was my responsibility as much as possible to shield the teachers from what was going on up above us, because we knew if we could keep it off the backs of the teachers, they would do their best to keep it off the backs of the kids. And at the end of the day, that was our responsibility, was the kids and the teachers. So that was it was a very difficult balancing act. Feeling like this is what we're trying to do. We were all optimistic at the beginning. We're trying to make it work for our campuses. We're still trying to be good stewards of the district and just do right by the kids, but not feeling that support. So again, I share in like that feeling of, oh my God, how can this be happening? And just completely being blindsided by it, because I never saw it coming. That happened on May the 8th. Ironically, it was Teacher Appreciation Week. That weekend was Mother's Day weekend. It was Mother's Day weekend, and so I went with my family to go visit my mother-in-law in Bryan College Station. We were celebrating an early Mother's Day on Saturday, but I started getting text messages and phone calls from my senior executive director, Joseph Villarreal. I too will use names. He was concerned because he said Dr. Stout was starting to receive angry emails from parents. And she wasn't having it. And so he wanted me to talk to my parents and my community and get them to back off. I didn't understand that. I said, no, they have every right to be angry, and I cannot control who they're going to email. Well, they love and respect you. They'll listen to you. I said, I'm not going to ask them to not be angry because you're asking me to resign my position. I mean, I was having a hard time wrapping my head around that. It's like, they have every right to be mad. I have every right to be mad. So he kept doing that and tried to coerce me into a decision that weekend. After going back and forth several times, I finally decided to stop, and I sent him and Dr. Stout and my executive director a long email memorializing that conversation because I wanted it documented that they were trying to coerce me into resignation and a decision when I was not ready. And when I asked him also, please, I just want to know why. Can you explain why? He said a couple of things that really surprised me. He said, well, we need a change in leadership. Why? Couldn't answer that. He said, you know, the sky's the limit for you. You can do whatever you want. It's not connecting for me. Then if the sky's the limit for me and I can do whatever I want, then why can't I stay here at Maryland, which is what I want, and continue to do this work? I agree with Gretchen when she says that our demographics were also changing. In the 7 years that I was at Maryland, we went from 7% emergent bilingual students to 26%. That's a huge explosion, and that really changes the way we have to teach. And when I would try to have that type of conversation with up above, they weren't listening. Because we are located very close to Pin Oak, and us and Pin Oak were in the same feeder pattern, they constantly wanted to